Ready?
Another few seconds.
Boy, you got it down to the exact science. Travis, we're going to be going in a minute. Okay. We're going to be starting in a second.
Very nice. Anyways, it's open.
All right, you're on.
All right. Wow, I feel good. Do I need to turn that down just a touch? We're good? Okay. Thank you for coming out. Dave Ulmer, Chair of the WakeLP. Just going to run through a few items here. We're going to have James Bledsoe talk to us for about 2 minutes, practice his stump speech, and then we'll get into this evening's presentation. First, thank you for everyone that showed up for the Interfaith Food Shuttle, the Bags for Seniors event this past Saturday. It was a lot of fun. As an administrative note, there is no meetup on Wednesday, July 3rd. I'm figuring most of you will be with family or somewhere else or having fun. Our July speaker is a Dr. Thomas Klein. He's going to talk about the opioid epidemic, but kind of from a different perspective. For some of you, you might remember we had David Fitzpatrick from NC State who talked about the victims and the addicts and rehab and the toll it takes on communities, particularly our own here in Wake County. Dr. Klein is going to bring a different perspective, how some laws have changed in North Carolina that actually make it hard for the patients that really do need that medication now to gain access to it. Other events, my favorite charity event of the year is 27 July. That's a Saturday. That's Habitat for Humanity. It will probably be a touch warm in late July in North Carolina. That said, it's a volunteer event, so you can take lots of breaks. I'd love to see a lot of people out there. If you cannot stay the whole day, I understand, and usually the way they work, Habitat for Humanity, they have stuff for people to do because they know everyone can't be on a black hot roof in July. They have painting and other things. So it's worked out in the past, and I encourage you to give it a shot. Yes, although we'll check. We'll get with Patrick afterwards. I think there's like a 16, there's an age limit somewhere. Talk to me afterwards. I have insight into how to work with the age limit. If it's your kid, anyway, you get the point. And Penkowski is not here, but he has done new updated door hangers for us and wrap cards that are good with our brand. What else do we have here? I've been delivering actually good news recently on different bills that are working through the NCGA. Everybody remembers all of our candidates talked about occupational licensing and barriers to work for people that have previous criminal convictions or need to get licenses to do stuff that maybe they shouldn't need a license for. But there's HB 770 and Senate Bill 305 working their way through the NCGA, and it's a bipartisan, you never hear about this stuff, it's a bipartisan effort, and you had both the John Locke Foundation and NC Justice sign on, and so it looks like there'll be some meaningful reform around occupational licensing, which is something that we're always talking about. So look, when we go to events as candidates and we talk about these things, we educate voters. We're also educating the people that often win these races, and they have a different perspective on it. So thank you everyone who ran in 2018 and talked about that issue. With that, I am going to remind everyone, Raleigh City Council has elections coming up. We vote October 8th, and boy, do we need to vote. We will probably have another event where I focus specifically on candidates and policy and what we need to be looking at as far as what this council has done and candidates we may want to consider helping. But with that, James Bledsoe, who is running at large, is going to give us a little bit of his time, and then we'll move on to the presentation.
Hi everyone, James Bledsoe, running for Raleigh City Council at large. Quick little bit about me, because I only got 2 minutes. I'm the only veteran running for Raleigh City Council. I'm also the only person that is in the military right now. I'm with the Army Reserve. Quick things about my platform. I am very much for STR, short-term rentals. You also know them as Airbnb. I want them to exist in the city. I want you to have the liberty to be an entrepreneur. I want you to earn some extra money, because this county and this city alone is very overtaxed. I mean, 10% that we're going to have this year or next year, is it? That's going to make things a lot more difficult. We need more income coming in. As far as ADUs, for those of you who don't know, it's called granny flats. We need growth in this city. We are not bringing in too much revenue, not too much growth, because this current city council is very anti-growth. They want to keep the small city of yesteryear, and that really hurts any revenue coming in. So I want soft density, but I also want hard density coming in. I want to upzone a lot of the areas near the rapid transit that's coming in along Pull Road and along, going into East Raleigh. Because I feel like we have more people coming in here, we'll also have more revenue coming in naturally. But I also want us to have small business a little bit more deregulated. I want food trucks, I want mobile retail deregulated a bit. I want you to be able to go out, sell your stuff, get a start. Because what this council doesn't realize is not everybody can afford a brick and mortar building. You have to start from the back of your truck. You might have to start from an RV or whatever, and then you can move on to the bigger game. So I just want you to have the liberty to do what you want, within reason, of course, but I want you to have the liberty to start your own business, to have someone rent out your backyard or even to rent out your house. I want you to have the ability to thrive in our city and in our county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, our guest speakers tonight are Justin Osborne and Matthew, and I am not going to get that last name, Gambale. They're from the law firm with the mobile law truck, and they also do have a brick and mortar office. I know most of you are libertarians. This is not the appropriate time to start confessing stuff that you've done to try to get help. So see your attorney, and don't just start telling stuff. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you all. Again, my name is Justin Osborne. This is Matthew Gambale, and we are 50% of the law firm of Osborne, Gambale, Beckley, and Budd. And I know that firm name means nothing to any of you, but at this point we're known as the RV lawyers. You're getting a handout now that's just a little info about us and what we've been doing. Yeah, sorry. And in the bottom corner you can see a picture of our RV. It's a beauty, a 33-foot Winnebago that we've retrofitted and turned into a mobile office. So we've got a little bit of time tonight, and we want to thank you again for letting us come out and speak with you all. We're going to share a little bit about what we're doing, the success that we've had so far. If there's time, my partner Matt is going to go discuss expunctions, which is something that we run into a lot when we meet with people. And that's a legal term that basically means how to clear your criminal record if you've served your time or if the case has been dismissed against you. And we run into people constantly that are dealing with issues of background checks where they can't get housing, they can't get jobs because they have this criminal record that is lingering, even though decades have passed since the offense. Briefly, there's 4 of us. We all went to UVA for law school. We are all former insurance defense attorneys, and if you look at your sheet, for half of the week, we are a regular law firm. We do plaintiff side personal injury, criminal defense, basically anything that may come up in your life, we can handle. What sets us apart and what is a little different is 2 days a week, we do free legal advice pop-ups. And what that means in practice is we go sit outside our RV in lawn chairs for about 8 to 10 hours a day. We answer every question that comes up to us free of charge. There's no sliding scale, there's no proof of income, nothing like that. Anyone that approaches us and comes up to us in the RV gets free legal advice all day long. That includes totally unnecessary, but that includes landlord-tenant disputes. We deal with that a lot. My landlord's doing X. Is he allowed to do that? We see employer disputes. We had a notice of foreclosure where we sat down for an hour and a half and walked through documents, walked through communications, and explained the process to people. In most cases, we are simply empowering people to take advantage of legal systems and processes that already exist. Sometimes we're educating folks, and then in rare instances, we're actually going and representing them, particularly in landlord disputes, which is a passion of mine, making sure people have a fair shake when it comes to landlords. So 2 days a week, we do this free legal pop-up, and so far the reception for 90% of it has been wildly supportive and encouraging. You can see our results so far. Technically, this is out of date because we had a pop-up yesterday, but if you look at your sheets, we've done 18 pop-ups since we formed in April of this year. As far as our hours, that's 424 attorney hours that we've been out there volunteering to the public, and we've helped 213 people so far. And that puts us on a pace to help over 900 by the end of the year and donate about 1,700 of our hours. The big question we get from folks is, we are still a for-profit firm. We've got to put gas in the RV. I've got a 17-month-old. We've got a mortgage payment. But why are we doing this? Why are we trying to give back and help the community? The statistics are staggering. Let me read them off so I don't get them wrong. 80% of civil legal needs in North Carolina are unmet every year. That's 4 out of 5. We're talking about landlords. We're talking about my employer is stealing wages. All of those needs are being unmet every year. 71% of households in North Carolina are going to have a civil legal need. You're going to have a family member who dies. You're going to have to go through the estates process. You're going to have something that comes up where you need a lawyer like us to help out. And 4 out of 5 of those are simply not being met. And the damning statistic is for every 11,000 people that need legal aid's help, there's 1 legal aid attorney that can help. So it's an organization that I support, I volunteered for before, but they are wildly underfunded and just wildly overworked, and they simply cannot do the same level of in-person engagement and effect that we have. So that's something that we're proud of and excited to do. That is sort of enough about what our firm is doing. I'm going to pass it over to my partner, Matt, who can talk to you a little bit about expunctions and the effect that a criminal record has on people years and even decades after the offense, and how it prevents economic development and prevents them from getting housing.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Gambale, as my partner mentioned. I am the partner at Osborne Gambale, Beckley & Budd, who handles criminal matters that ranges from anything like a traffic ticket all the way up to whatever you may be charged with, first-degree murder on down. I understand you all heard from the ACLU relatively recently about the cash bond system. I've got a lot of problems with that as well, so if you all have questions that have occurred to you since you heard about that and had a chance to think it over and let some of that percolate, and you'd like to talk with me about it or ask some questions at the conclusion, don't hesitate to do so. I'm ready to talk about that all day long. Expunctions kind of fall into a related category. That is a system that we have here that prevents people or impedes people who didn't do it and are not guilty, or who have reformed their lives since they may have had previous charges or instances of not thinking things through and find themselves in a bad situation, from living a normal life and staying out of jail and being able to have a meaningful opportunity to participate in society. I mean, we heard about professional licensing being a problem. A lot of professional licensing boards, if they see something on your record, even if it's merely an arrest, not even a conviction, that's the kind of thing that can come up on a background check. And I can tell you that the only type of event that you can get expunged from your record in North Carolina, free of charge, as a matter of right, is if you are acquitted, if you are found not guilty. If the government decides, hey, we don't have enough evidence in your case, so we're just going to take a dismissal, if you want to get that expunged and all the records of your arrests and everything expunged, you have to pay $175. You got to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and you've got to submit that and wait, in a lot of cases, up to a year for that to wind its way through all of the different agencies that have to cast eyes on it before a judge will finally sign an order saying, okay, these records can be destroyed. Even if you're acquitted, you still got to fill out that paperwork. The only thing you're spared is you don't have to pay $175. These are the kinds of things that in other states, there's been a lot of discussion about passing a law that some of these things should happen automatically. Honestly, if the government has prosecuted you or decided to prosecute you, they take a dismissal. Why aren't these things just being expunged automatically? You're found not guilty. Why isn't it just being expunged automatically? A lot of people just don't even realize that this is a process available to them. They figure, hey, I got found not guilty, it's my lucky day. They go about their lives, and then years down the road, they're wondering, gee, why did I get denied by that apartment complex? Why did I not get that job and somebody else did? You don't always get an explanation when somebody goes in a different direction, something that you'd otherwise be entitled to get. And part of the problem is people either aren't aware of this process, or the barriers to completing the process are a real problem for them. And especially things like old convictions. There's a lot less legislative sympathy for people who have been convicted. But even with respect to something like that, if it's 10 or 15 years ago, and you've led a pure life since then, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get the benefit of that and be a full participant in our society and have all the same opportunities that you would have had before that even occurred. People say, God forgives. North Carolina does too, but for $175 and a great deal of work, and potentially in a lot of cases hiring a lawyer just to help you navigate. And a good example, we had somebody come up to us at the RV who had hired a lawyer. And he told us that at the end of the year-long process, he got notified, well, because the two people who filled out part of the paperwork in support of his application were married, it had to be denied and he had to start over. He invested $175, he paid the lawyer. In all likelihood, the lawyer told him, hey, you got to find two people, and told him the instructions. But the instructions are complicated, and he may not have even known that those people were married. But the government knows, and when it gets up to the judge, they check that. That's part of why it takes a year. All these different agencies are evaluating what you've submitted. And I mean, here's a guy that had a 10-year-old conviction, trying to get it off his record so he can apply for professional licensing, so he can apply for housing, and he's got to start over. It's going to be another year minimum. There's no way to just correct that error and get him heard right away. It has to go through the entire process again. And here's a circumstance where the legislature really cared about kind of purging these records that we don't need for any real legitimate purpose. We could have things fall off your record after a certain amount of time. There's no reason why it has to be something that you have to take an affirmative step to get your record cleared. I mean, it's available. We could have a computer system evaluating whether people are eligible or not and just expunging these records. I mean, I can tell you that people think that, oh, well, after a certain amount of time, it falls off my record. And a lot of those misconceptions come from things like traffic tickets, where people know a little bit of that, well, my DMV points go away, and that's true. Things like my insurance points go away after a certain number of years, and you're not continuing to be charged the upcharges of the premiums after a certain amount of time. But records of traffic tickets on up never go away on their own. The only way to get them to go away is either a pardon of innocence from the governor or getting an expunction. And there's a process to get both of those, or to even have the opportunity to have both of those. And there's really no reason to have that process. California is one of the leading examples of a state that has tried to rectify part of the situation legislatively, making it kind of a perfunctory thing that if you're found not guilty, why do you have to apply for an expunction? That should just be automatic. Those records should be destroyed across the board without you having to do anything or know to do anything. I know a part of the statute that is being advocated for out there also addresses dismissals. The government takes a dismissal and they choose not to refile your case after a certain period of time. Those records should be expunged. Part of the reason that North Carolina requires that you pay $175 to apply for expunction of a dismissal is because there are a lot of reasons the government may choose to take a dismissal that don't necessarily mean you're not guilty. And that's how they justify it. But at the same time, if the government had the goods, they'd move forward with the prosecution. So I don't understand why, especially indigent people have to pay $175 to get something, to get a dismissal expunged, even if it was years ago, and there was no way the government still has interest in prosecuting them for an ounce of marijuana years down the road. Why isn't that just all expunged? Because these people will get pulled over at traffic stops. The cop will search their record, find stuff on there. That can do things like prolong traffic stops. Man, this person might be a little more interesting than they otherwise would be. Even things like that, an expunction could be helpful. You don't know what encounters you may have with law enforcement or folks may have down the road. It may be that they never really suffered the impact in housing, or never suffered the impact applying for a professional license that they didn't get. But if they get pulled over and the police see something interesting on there, it may not catch their eye that it was 20 years ago. They just say, man, this person was involved in drugs. Let's investigate further. And that makes a bad situation worse. Why do those people who have had something years ago have to go through this whole rigmarole to get it to fall off their record? I mean, if the government maintains the records the way they have been, I mean, who knows what we're paying or the state is paying to Google or whatever, or Microsoft or whatever big data company they're using to keep all of these records. And they're accumulating them year after year after year, and they never dissipate. So, those of you who are interested in kind of political fixes to some of these problems and are advocating for them, addressing expunctions and making some of these things automatic, I think would help a lot of people, particularly the indigent, and it would make my job a lot easier when I encounter people who, maybe they have lapsed or have made a mistake again down the road. They don't have all these old convictions that are just adding points on their sentence when they're a different person, and they may have lapsed or had a problem, but there's no reason for something 20 years ago to affect the sentence for something today when you have that option. I think I've been kind of on my soapbox long enough. I get kind of up about it. I've been constraining my Italian half from waving the microphone around so none of y'all can hear me. But if you have questions about expunctions, if you want to talk about cash bail, let me know.
I have an expunction question. Why is expunction not a standard service that defense lawyers offer whenever they get an acquittal?
We do that, and I can tell you that especially for felonies and misdemeanors that are outside of the infraction court, generally it doesn't pay to try to get a traffic ticket expunged. That is available, and there are people who are interested in that if you're acquitted of a speeding ticket. The reason not to get an expunction to something like that is if you're acquitted, it doesn't go on your driving record. So I will do that, and that will expunge the arrest, but that's kind of not a standard thing for something like a speeding ticket. But as part of my flat fee for anything else, if I get an acquittal,
Well,
I'll
I'm not
file it.
surprised that you do it, but is that standard for?
It is standard for acquittals. I can tell you it's generally not for dismissals, because again, there's a number of reasons why the government may take a dismissal, and the government can reopen the case. A lot of crimes, there are no statutes of limitations, so the government can take a voluntary dismissal. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's over. So I can see why a lot of lawyers don't tell their clients, well, let's go for the expunction, because, well, the government could refile next week after you do all the paperwork. So generally, there's a time period of waiting, and a lot of times just the engagement agreements that are entered, you got to have your engagement end at some point after the case is over. So I think that's one hurdle, and that's why the legislative fix, I think, is a little more attractive, because I just don't foresee a lot of my fellow members of the defense bar having that as a service for things like dismissals, where that could be really significant for a lot of people. I don't think as much acquittals are the problem, I guess. It's kind of a long answer to a short question. But certainly for convictions and things like that, there are waiting periods for those, and you can't do the expunction right away. And at some point, your relationship with the client has got to end, and something else has to begin. So the legislature, I think, can address things a lot more automatically, I think, than my fellow lawyers can. Another question?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I mean, you make a perfectly logical argument for why expunction should just, happen. But the government isn't exactly doing for common sense. What are their arguments to kind of hang on to these arguments?
Repeat the question, please.
This question is, well, what are the government's arguments and those who support the current system? What kind of arguments do they advance as a counterpoint to what I've discussed in terms of why we don't let expunctions occur automatically? And I think that there's a little bit of the soft on crime threat to politicians, that it's certainly not going to be politically popular to have convictions fall off of people's records, because hey, these are people who have been convicted, and there's really no length of time after which certain types of crimes become any more or less palatable. And I think that there's kind of a general attitude that hey, folks who have done certain things, that's just unforgivable to a lot of folks, and so politically that can be pretty fraught when you're dealing with convictions. I think even in terms of dismissals and acquittals, I think there is an attitude among some sectors of the public and folks who represent them in legislatures to think, well, if you've been arrested, you've done something, and you might have snaked your way out of it somehow, but you probably did something, and they don't want law enforcement to be unaware that you have this in case you're doing something else, and it could aid in their investigation to know you've done something previously. That argument's not really the strongest one, in my opinion, because expunctions in North Carolina, as a result of the statutory change that was made in 2017, went into effect in December of 2017, rather, even if you get an expunction, your records are still accessible in a limited way to law enforcement. So nobody can find it on a background check. An employer or landlord isn't going to be able to find that. But if you've got something in your past that could aid in an investigation down the road, if you get back to old habits or something, law enforcement can still gain access to that. But it still allows people to kind of reset their record with respect to participating in public life. As long as they're not having encounters with law enforcement, they're good. And I think that's a good counterpoint to that argument. But I think the better argument that they have is just you can't let too many of these things go, because you really do want people to have elevated sentences if they're doing things again and again. And they've already kind of made an adjustment to the statute, shortening the time periods after which you can apply for an expunction if you're convicted. I don't think there really is a good argument at all, though, for putting hurdles in the way of expunctions for acquittals. I mean, if you're found not guilty, really the only argument available is the one I just criticized, which is to say, well, they got arrested, they must have been up to no good, and maybe they got their way out of it somehow, but we don't want to just make it free. But it really should be free, in my opinion. Another question.
So you mentioned that a lot of people seem to be unaware. Can you comment on how government schools or public schools are doing in warning young people about this system that exists? Do they know, does the average high school graduating senior know about expungement of records if they get in that situation when they do something stupid? So they're going to do, we all know that. Yeah. But do they know the system as a requirement for graduating high school?
Sure. The question for those of you watching online is, what are the public schools and any other public agency or anyone for that matter doing to educate young people so they know about the system for expunctions and what the detriments could be to them from failing to be aware of that system and taking advantage of it. As a preface, I'll say it's a lot easier to get something expunged, even a conviction, if you've done it before you were 20. There are expunction programs, among the constellation of laws in North Carolina that allow expunctions, and they all have different forms and different instructions you have to follow to avail yourselves of them. There are more opportunities available for youthful offenders. That has been politically popular in the past, to forgive and forget some of the things that we do as young people. I don't think that much of anything is going on, though, anywhere really, to educate young people that this is an option. And I have had people ask me about expunctions when we have been out at the mobile office for their kids about to graduate from college. Hey, they're starting to apply for jobs, and now they are starting to think about this. And so by the time they start thinking about it, it's really too late. Because it's going to take a year, even if I started the process that minute, it's going to take a year to get it if they're eligible for it. And their window kind of to apply for those post-graduation jobs has come and gone. So I don't think there is a good program in place to teach people about these types of things. I mean, I hesitate to cite any statistics kind of off the top of my head, but I recall seeing things to the effect that the average high school student can't name the 3 branches of government. So I would be shocked if there's much awareness of the process for expunctions. And kind of a related thing you could get, it's called the certificate of relief. If you're not eligible for an expunction, for lower level felonies and certain classes of misdemeanors, if you're still outside the time period to apply for an expunction, you can get what's called a certificate of relief, which basically gets you back all of the rights that are collateral to a conviction that you end up losing. Things like the right to vote, the right to own firearms, the right to participate in certain public programs. Student loans can become accessible to young people. And that's certainly an area that would be of interest to young people if they'd be aware of it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people who are denied student loans that they'd otherwise be able to get because they have no idea about their ability to get a certificate of relief. Maybe they look up online, they get as far as expunction, see they're not eligible for that, and don't realize there's something else they can do. So, I mean, it's just, it goes back to what my partner had mentioned about the deficit between the need and the number of lawyers who are available to help educate people. And I just don't think the schools are able to do much.
Got Victoria, and then I think Ace, you had a question. So
I'm sorry, a bunch of questions. So, did I understand you to say that the cops can see the record from everything and
I believe the question for those of you watching online is does law enforcement still have access to the records even after you've gotten an expunction under the new law? And the answer to that question is yes and no. I mean, the access is limited, but there is no absolute complete expunction from everything the government has access to anymore in North Carolina. Well, it's limited by a couple of things. One, there are files that are maintained by the SBI, which is kind of the state agency. But if you're pulled over at a traffic stop and you've gotten something expunged, the officer pulling you over isn't able to see it on their computer.
So it's a separate system.
Yes. Record, yeah, it limits how many copies of the records are available across the state. So,
And so I'm not, I don't know, all of them will get one expression ever. Is that no longer true?
that is no longer true, and that hasn't been true since a couple of revisions to the statute ago. The question is whether there is any limitation on the number of expunctions you can get, and the answer to that question is no, with an asterisk. And the asterisk is there are limitations on each of the different ways that you can get an expunction. Some of them have limitations on other charges that you might have had. And there used to be some controversy among lawyers not really having had a clear answer from the courts that the statutes didn't match up very well. So there's concern that if I'm trying to get two different charges expunged at the same time using different mechanisms to get an expunction, do I have to do one first before the other? Or is it going to block me from doing both? And the legislature hasn't resolved most of that controversy, so the short answer now is you're entitled to unlimited expunctions as long as you meet the requirements under whatever statute you're applying.
Okay, and one more, sorry. How exactly long is the requirement to wait?
The question for those.
Versus 5 months, and so on.
Sure. The question for those of you online is, well, what are the waiting periods to get something expunged? I can tell you for a dismissal or acquittal, there is no waiting period. You can do it immediately, which, addressing, going back to one of the previous questions, if your client is acquitted, it's a relatively easy process to just begin the expunction right out of the gate. Addressing the question that was asked earlier, that's something that I offer to my clients, that, hey, if you get acquitted, I'll just do that expunction right away. It's just a matter of filling out a form and turning it in. If you are convicted of different things, the waiting periods vary depending on what kind of offense you're charged with and your age at the time of the offense. For example, I mentioned earlier that there are statutes and avenues for expunction that are available to what they call youthful offenders. The kind of young and dumb get out of jail free card is what I like to call it. The waiting periods are shorter than if an adult had done the same thing. Waiting periods vary between 5 and 10 years. They used to be a lot longer, and these waiting periods I'm describing now have to do with convictions. If you have a conviction on your record that is an older conviction, there are waiting periods, and they vary depending on the offense and how old you were at the time. And that's part of the reason why this is a difficult process for somebody who's not educated or who's not a lawyer, doesn't have access to a lawyer, to navigate. Because you have to read the instructions for the form for the statute that you're applying for an expunction under, and they are all different. And if you make a mistake or conclude you're not eligible, or maybe you are, then you're missing an opportunity to get your record clear.
Please, and then Bobby, please.
My question might be go beyond expunging a record, but the internet's everywhere. I have a friend who was charged with something, but it was never prosecuted. But if someone Googles her name, it comes up with horrible things. Can lawyers do anything? It's not just court records; it's media records, it's mugshots. Can those things be made good?
The question for those of you on the internet, this is especially pertinent for you all. It sounds like once you hear the question, you'll get that. But the question had to do with anything that a lawyer can do to fix the internet, essentially. that you may not have even been prosecuted for an arrest, but it's all over online. And you're on mugshots.com, and there's a news report about everything you've been accused of, and you're essentially just Google bombed. Any employer or prospective relationship partner or landlord that just enters your name just sees that you were accused of something bad. The short answer is that a lawyer can do something about a lot of that stuff. I can tell you that most of the major mugshot websites have faced lawsuits that have had kind of mixed success getting them to take things down. But because of the expense of dealing with those things, generally if you get an expunction order entered and have a lawyer send that to mugshots.com or another similar website, they often have a policy of taking your information down. News organizations, hit or miss. Some of them have that policy, others don't. Generally, local news is where most of my clients end up. I haven't yet represented anybody who is famous enough to be, on the front of the New York Times. I have no idea what their policy may be. But local news, generally, they just take things down because they've got limited space on their servers. So if you wait long enough, that's probably going away. But the short answer to whether I can do anything beyond sending them a letter saying, hey, a judge has ordered that this be expunged from the state's records, why don't you all voluntarily take it down or take it down pursuant to your policy? Not much I can do to force them to take it down. Unless there's something in there that is false or demonstrably false. If the article online, for example, says you actually did this, and it's all been you were acquitted, and then the records are all expunged, maybe an argument that that's something that's false, and I can advocate a little more strongly to get it taken down. But generally, newspapers are wise to that, and if they publish an article about your arrest, it's going to say something to the effect that you were arrested and you're accused of XYZ. The charges are XYZ, and that's why we're posting up this person's mugshot. And that's a lot harder to force them to take it down. I mean, it's intersection between the First Amendment and folks' rights to have things go away. I mean, the internet just never forgets, and it's just one of those things that really adds on to the detriment of having the record for a lot of people. Not only do they have this record, they've also got all that out there. I can do a lot better job addressing the record.
So we're gonna go with Bobby's question, and then there's one more question. And if you want to switch out because your meal is here, okay. Bobby had a question.
Yes, please. This is a little bit off the subject of what you're talking about. It continues to come up in my life. You're involved in a lot of traffic bang up. It is my contention that if you report this to the insurance company, regardless of who is at fault, even if the other person gets a ticket, that your insurance will go up. I'm not asking the legal question, I'm asking the practical question. What happens in the real world if Patrick and I have an accident and we report it, both houses' insurance will go up, is my contention.
Okay. The question has to do with folks getting in a traffic accident, and irrespective of who was at fault, if they report it to insurance, is there the potential for both of their insurance to go up, or is that a foregone conclusion that both of them will be charged more by their insurance company? I can tell you that insurance is like any other business, although insurance is much more heavily regulated than a lot of businesses, and there are more limitations on what they're allowed to charge for premiums. They, in a lot of cases, can do what they like. So if their underwriting program tells them that somebody who's been in an accident, regardless of who is at fault, is more of a risk, then they'll charge more. But I can tell you that there is nothing that is requiring or mandating that result. And I'm sure that insurance companies that just did that as a matter of policy would not do so well in business as compared to those insurance companies that didn't. I can tell you that if you are found to be at fault for an accident, and particularly if you're convicted of an infraction as a result of that accident, then insurance points will be assessed against your license. And insurance companies are expressly authorized by North Carolina law to increase your premium on a set schedule, depending on how many insurance points you have. But I would say really the only time that your insurance is almost certain to go up as a result of an accident that you're found not to be at fault is if you have been getting a break on your insurance through a program that your insurer may have for being accident-free. A lot of insurers advertise online and in the press, and we've all seen the commercials where, hey, you get kind of the accident-free bonus. So there are a lot of people who are kind of in their bonus time where they've been accident-free, and then their insurance ends up going up because they've had an accident. It may feel to you that my insurance has gone up, but really your insurance has just kind of gone back to where where it was before you were getting a discount. So kind of the same difference, but I can tell you that insurance companies are a business, they can do whatever they like on that.
Question over here.
I know someone has a minor felony, and so at their time, so the felony would be on their record.
In North Carolina?
Well, the question is whether a felony is going to be on your record forever. And this question had the caveat that the conviction, it sounds like, was in Texas. I can tell you that I have no idea what the requirements are to expunge something in Texas. So I can't really comment on what opportunities there may be in Texas to get something expunged. I can tell you in North Carolina, it's absolutely true that a felony will be on your record forever, unless you can get it expunged or get a pardon of innocence from the government. But just because it's a felony doesn't mean you're ineligible to get an expunction. There are a lot of requirements, and certain felonies are not eligible. For example, some types of sex offenses are not eligible to get an expunction ever. Some DUIs, you can't get expunged under any circumstances. For the most part, all DUIs at this point, after the statute's been amended, unless you have a really old conviction from before the new statute went into effect. But generally speaking, folks who have a felony conviction should not assume, without talking to a lawyer, that nothing can be done. Because there are opportunities in North Carolina, and I imagine in a lot of other states, to expunge even felonies, assuming that other prerequisites are met.
So with your mobile service, it's not surprising that you're running into spider webs and problems with the city council because you're actually helping people. Imagine that. But how far do you travel? Are you just North Carolina or just Wake County, or will you travel out of town to meet with somebody?
Well, I think that this is a good opportunity for me to pass the mic over to my partner who has taken the lead on where we're going to be. I'll tell you the short answer. I'll let Justin give the long answer, which is we right now have been focused primarily around the Triangle in North Carolina, but Justin is licensed in South Carolina as well. And we have much bigger goals than what we've been able to accomplish just in the last couple months. I'll let him talk a little bit more about what our plans may be on that.
So far, the mobile unit has taken us from Garner to Clayton. We'll be in Sanford this weekend, Nightdale, Cary, anywhere that we've been able to get to so far, and really anywhere we found a business that will either allow us to pop up or will sort of look the other way to sort of tolerate us being out there. The goal eventually is to span from mountains to Manio, and maybe get to South Carolina as well. As we have sort of the resources available to us and the bandwidth to do it. Right now, it's full of lawyers. We've got no support staff. It is a skeleton crew doing it as we speak. But yeah, at the very minimum, we want to hit 50-mile radius of Raleigh consecutively and make sure all those areas are covered. Yes.
When's the last time you were in Wake County as a pop-up?
Yesterday. They all start to blend together. Yesterday we were on New Bern Avenue. There's if anyone's familiar with the Walmart there on New Bern Avenue,
Yeah.
There's a shopping center before that, Thieves Market. We were parked out there yesterday. And from 10 to 6 p.m. we met, I believe 15 people yesterday, a couple folks about expunctions, traffic tickets, that sort of thing. But we try to be in Wake County, at least half the time. And next week will be actually, I'm going to go ahead and plug us, next Tuesday we'll be at the Food Line on Raleigh Boulevard from 10 to 6.
Final question to wrap up. Who has the license to drive that thing?
Shockingly, no special licensing is required.
Wow.
The first time that any of us drove it, we bought it down in Myrtle Beach, and I drove it back. And that was my first time driving an RV in the rain. At night, and I still don't think I'm quite enough.
The police will pull over 4 lawyers. We'll see how that goes.
The one thing he told me when we were driving back, he's like, "Have you ever seen an RV pulled over by the cops?" I thought, "No." He's like, "Exactly. It'll be fine." All
right. Well, thank you. Round of applause. This is also a gift. Actually, when the beer's in there afterwards, you're actually smarter because it was in a WakeLP science class. Thank you for coming out. It was a delight to have you. Again, this is part of our education. As libertarians, we should know that the government screws people almost as well, probably more often than it does help them. The three branches of government are bad, worse, and horrific. So just keep that in mind. I mean, we were the last state to raise the age. I mean, out of the 50 states, North Carolina was still treating a lot of juveniles like adults, regardless of the crime, for a long time. So the reforms are coming, just like occupational licensing. They're just taking a while. But part of that is just talking to people, going to different groups, doing outreach, and talking about these issues, because there is common ground. I mean, the fact that you can get John Locke Foundation and NC Justice to do a joint press release on some of these issues is important. And then you need to go to groups. Brad and I were in North CAC just yesterday. A group that is advocating for a police oversight board was there. I would say they were not warmly received by most of the group. It was a different demographic. And so to have somebody in the audience that is actually saying, hey, how many of these arrests that are happening in parts of Raleigh are related to marijuana? And it was significant. I think it was over half. I mean, that's the excuse. I mean, marijuana is the excuse. It's not just, and I'm not advocating people should smoke marijuana. It becomes an excuse for police to have an interaction with somebody, to then get them to record, and then to cause all this problem. And it's getting even harder now because in a lot of states, it's either legal completely for recreational purposes or for medical purposes. So we have a criminal justice system that really isn't, as the person from the ACLU pointed out, oriented towards justice. So keep that in mind, keep doing outreach, keep learning about these issues, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Just found out, Habitat for Humanity, 17. You're 17, you need a permit.
17 or younger.
There's always a way if you don't say things out loud. That's what I coach this group. Just as a general note, we'll stop the recording now. Just stop that. Cut that off. Make that thing stop. Is it done?
It's stopping.
Still not done.
It's stopping.